Welcome to the deep dive. Today, our sources throw us right into, well, a really classic conflict, don't they? It's that tension between following the rules, the structure, and just immediate human compassion.
That's exactly it. We're looking at some high-level theology from Paul, thinking about spiritual freedom, and then bam, we see it clash head-on with the rule book during a Sabbath service in Luke.
It's quite the collision. We're taking Paul's ideas from Romans 8 about, what freedom really means spiritually.
And connecting that directly to this incredibly powerful story in Luke 13. We want to see what happens when that idea of spiritual liberation meets someone trapped in physical bondage for decades.
Okay, so let's dig into this. Our mission today isn't just to summarize. We want to explore what it feels like, what it means to be truly unbound. How do you go from being like a debtor, always owing something, to being a free heir living in grace?
Yeah, and the key is connecting Paul's theory of adoption, this major identity shift, to this specific woman in Luke carrying this physical burden for a staggering 18 years. Makes the theology very real.
Right. So to really get the impact of that healing story in Luke, we first need to grasp the radical change in identity Paul lays out in Romans. It starts with this fundamental choice, doesn't it? Living by the flesh or being led by the Spirit.
Well, exactly. That's the starting point.
And Paul doesn't mince words. He says we are not debtors to the flesh. We don't owe that old way of living anything. That way, he says, just leads to death. But what did he mean by flesh? For people back then living in the Roman world, why was it such a big deal to say you're not in debt to that?
That's a great question, because flesh here isn't just, the physical body. It's more about living life under compulsion.
Yeah.
It's the old patterns, the self-interest, this constant pressure to perform perfectly, maybe to satisfy some external law or expectation.
Like being stuck in a contract you can't fulfill.
Sort of, yeah. Where failure means you're always falling short, always in debt. Paul says our true identity, our real life, is found in the Spirit. And it's the Spirit that actually empowers us to put to death those destructive patterns, those deeds of the body.
Okay, so if we're free from that debt, that changes everything. It shatters the old way of thinking. So if we're not debtors anymore, what's the new status Paul talks about? And why was that so radical for his audience who knew Roman law inside and out?
Well, this is where it gets really interesting. He says we didn't get a spirit of slavery causing us to fall back into fear, that old life, defined by guilt, anxiety, always looking over your shoulder. That's gone.
Completely wiped away.
That's the idea. Instead, Paul says we received a spirit of adoption. Now, for us today, adoption is a wonderful thing, often focused on family and love. But in the Roman Empire, it was also a huge legal and, frankly, financial deal.
Right, it was a total legal reset, wasn't it? Like hitting Ctrl plus Alt plus Delete on your old life.
Absolutely. In Roman law, when someone, usually a male, was adopted, his legal ties to his birth family were just severed, gone, any debts he owed canceled, poof. And instantly, he gained full rights as a child in the new family, including inheritance rights to the father's estate.
Wow, so he became an immediate, legitimate heir.
Exactly. Paul is using this very concrete, very powerful legal reality. This isn't just, a nice metaphor for him. This adoption makes us sons of God, and daughters too, we'd say, giving us this incredible intimacy, the right to cry out, Abba, Father.
Abba, that's that Aramaic word, right? Like daddy. It's incredibly personal.
It completely changes the dynamic. You go from maybe fearing a distant judge to having this intimate connection with a loving Father. It confirms, like Paul says, that we are children of God. And here's the kicker. We become heirs of God and joint heirs with Christ.
Joint heirs. That means sharing in everything. It sounds boundless. But then Paul adds this condition, this little phrase that seems to bring us back down to earth. If only we suffer with him so that we may also be glorified with him. What's that about?
Yeah, it's important. The freedom isn't freedom from reality. It's freedom within it. We're freed from the slavery of fear, yes, but we're adopted into a family. And families share things, the joys, the responsibilities, sometimes the hardships.
So the suffering isn't like a payment to get in?
No, I don't think so. The adoption, the entry, that's secured by grace. The suffering is more about participating fully in the life of the family, sharing the journey, the mission, if you will. It's part of the deal of being an heir alongside Christ.
Okay, that makes sense. But how does this grand theological idea of being a free heir, this boundless freedom, actually work when it slams into real-world rules and religious structures? That's where Luke 13 comes in, right? We shift from the theory in Romans to this very tense, very real moment in a synagogue.
Exactly. The setting's pretty ordinary, actually. A Sabbath service. Jesus is teaching, as he often did. But Luke immediately zooms in on one person.
This woman.
This woman who had been crippled by, the text says, a spirit for 18 years.
18 years. Just pause on that. Nearly 2 decades defined by this condition. The sources say she was bent over, completely incapable of standing erect. Imagine that. It's not just physical. It's this deep, defining bondage. Her whole identity shaped by infirmity.
It's profound suffering. And when Jesus sees her, the person, not just the condition, the spiritual truth we just talked about in Romans, that spirit of adoption and freedom, it demands action right now.
He doesn't wait. No asking permission, no checking the schedule.
None of that. He calls her over. He speaks directly to her situation. Woman, you are set free of your infirmity, a declaration. And then, crucially, he lays his hands on her, that physical contact.
And the result is immediate. Just like that, she at once stood up straight and glorified God. Real-time liberation. That's the adopted heir Jesus, putting that freedom into action for someone else, instantly.
It's an incredible moment. But of course, you can't have a public miracle like that, especially on the Sabbath, without causing ripples, or maybe waves.
Yeah, the reaction is just as immediate as the healing, isn't it? The leader of the synagogue, the guy in charge of keeping order, upholding the Sabbath rules, he was, the text says, indignant. Angry.
Indignant that Jesus had cured on the Sabbath. Notice the focus shift. He goes straight from this woman's incredible liberation to the perceived breaking of a rule.
And he doesn't keep it to himself. He addresses the whole crowd, basically telling them off for witnessing this act of mercy. There are 6 days when work should be done. Come on those days to be cured, not on the Sabbath day.
He's drawing a very clear line in the sand. This is not allowed today.
No, wait, let's try and see his perspective for a second. Is he just being difficult, or is he genuinely trying to protect the Sabbath? Why was healing even considered work in the first place? What was the rule?
That's fair. The Sabbath laws stemming from the commandment were intended to stop regular labor, commerce, the stuff you do for profit or necessity during the week.
Yeah.
The goal was rest, focusing on God.
Yeah.
So from a very rigid standpoint, performing a cure could be seen as performing an action, maybe even a type of labor. The leader is likely trying to uphold that tradition, maintain the sanctity of the day as he understands it.
Okay. But Jesus clearly sees it differently. He sees the difference between, say, unnecessary business and necessary liberation.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's why his response is so sharp. He calls them hypocrites in strong language. He's pointing directly at what he sees as a massive inconsistency in how they apply their own rules.
He doesn't just call them names, though. He uses this analogy, something everyone there would instantly get.
Right. It's brilliant, actually. He forces them to confront their own behavior, their everyday practices concerning their animals.
The livestock argument. He asks, doesn't every single one of you untie his ox or his ass from the manger and lead it out for watering on the Sabbath?
Exactly. They routinely perform this small act of work untying an animal, leading it out of basic compassion and necessity for the animal's well-being. They didn't let their animal suffer thirst just because it was the Sabbath.
Okay, so if you do that for an animal...
That's the pivot. Jesus makes the argument. If basic compassion extends to your livestock, to an ox or a donkey, to relieve temporary distress, how much more should it extend to a human being? Especially, as he then points out,
he calls her a daughter of Abraham. That's significant, right? He's not just calling her this woman, he's restoring her status, putting her right back into the heart of the faith community.
Precisely. He elevates her. She's not just some random person breaking the rules by getting healed. She's a member of the covenant family, someone precious, someone whom, Jesus says, Satan has bound for 18 years now. He reframes her condition as bondage, not just illness.
So her situation isn't a minor ache she could wait out. It's this profound, long-term spiritual and physical prison.
Yes. And that makes his final question absolutely piercing. Ought she not to have been set free on the Sabbath day from this bondage? He completely reframes the healing. It's not optional work that could be postponed. It's an immediate, necessary act of liberation from bondage. That changes the whole equation.
The power of that logic is, well, you see the effect immediately in the story. The text says his adversaries were humiliated, silenced. They had no comeback.
How could they? He used their own logic, their own values, against their rigid application of the rule. Meanwhile, the crowd, the ordinary people, they rejoiced at all the splendid deeds done by him. Public opinion was decisively on the side of compassion.
It really was a victory for mercy over legalism. We started with Paul's idea in Romans, this spiritual adoption, freedom from fear. And Luke shows us that Inheriting that freedom, that status, means your primary job shifts, doesn't it? From just following rules to actively showing mercy.
That seems to be the core message. The spirit of adoption leads to acts of liberation.
So if we pull back and look at the bigger picture, this theme of freedom, of standing tall again, how do the Psalms kind of echo or amplify this? How does standing up physically connect to being a spiritual heir?
Well, the connection is really quite beautiful. Think about Psalm 68, often seen as a psalm about God's salvation and power. It describes God specifically as the father of orphans and the defender of widows. These are vulnerable people. And it says God leads forth prisoners to prosperity and bears our burdens.
And this woman, bent over, trapped for 18 years. She absolutely fits that description of a prisoner, doesn't she? A prisoner in her own body.
Exactly. Her being set free, standing upright instantly, is like a living embodiment of that psalm, God leading a prisoner out. And it links directly to another psalm, Psalm 146, which says very simply, "The Lord lifts up those who are bowed down."
Wow. So her physical posture changing is an outward sign of that inner spiritual reality Paul was talking about, being lifted up, set free.
It seems so. The reflection sources really drive this home, saying God wants our freedom spiritually, emotionally, physically, and crucially, that mercy and love must come before rigid observance of the law. The rules should serve people's liberation, not hinder it.
The person matters more than the procedure, essentially.
At the end of the day, yes.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge for us, isn't it? What does this spirit of adoption actually call us to do? It should give us the courage, the grace to see past maybe the surface rules or conventions that bind us or others.
And to focus on what's truly needed.
Yes, on human dignity, on liberation. When grace touches us, the sources suggest we stop living hunched over by fear or obligation. We begin to walk upright, with courage, with confidence, and with compassion for others.
And that final Alleluia reading just anchors it all, reminding us where this power comes from. Your word, O Lord, is truth. Consecrate us in the truth. The ultimate truth, revealed in actions like Jesus's, is compassionate liberation.
So we've journeyed from this profound idea in Romans, moving from slavery to adoption, becoming heirs, and seen it explode into action in Luke. That new status demands we act. We show compassion immediately, decisively, even if it bumps up against established norms.
Yeah, we had some really key points. That Roman concept of adoption being a total reset, the sheer weight of 18 years of suffering making the healing necessary, not optional, and of course Jesus' brilliant use of the ox and donkey analogy to completely reframe the Sabbath work debate.
It all ties together, and it leaves us with a pretty pointed question drawn from the heart of these sources. If compassion helps others stand tall again, physically or metaphorically,
who can you reach out to?
Right. Who can you reach out to today? Maybe with just a simple act of kindness or encouragement. How can you help someone else stand a little taller through love? And maybe look inward too. What immediate, necessary act of liberation or compassion is needed in your own life? Or for someone close to you? Is there some rigid rule, some habit, maybe even just your schedule that you're letting get in the way of a necessary act of mercy or even self-care? Something to think about.